I can see that we are more than 100 people, almost 120 by now, and this is indeed an amazing number. Thank you. Before we start, could you please save the date for our Christmas concert? We can move on to the concert, please. Thank you. Which will be live from the Istanbul Cathedral next Saturday. The Zoom details for this event will be the same, but will be shared just for practical purposes on social media. We are very happy to see Dr. Philip Mansel with us, who will be our guest speaker this evening. With Dr. Mansel, we will have a colorful journey from Istanbul to Smyrna, viewed through the brushstrokes of Levantine artists. I would now like to remind you our housekeeping rules for this evening. Please kindly note that your microphones will be muted throughout the event. You may ask questions at the end of Dr. Mansel's speech by writing in the chat box. Please make sure that we can read your full name while you're asking the questions, and I will direct your questions to Dr. Mansel. As this is the first event organized by the Levantine Association of Turkey, I would now like to invite Chairman Mr. Giuliano Glogini to introduce the new organization of Levantines in Turkey. Giuliano, please.
Yes, thank you, Selva. Yes, first, my name is Giuliano Glogini. I am an Italian Levantine. I live in Turkey. And I am, at the moment, I am the president of the Levantine Association in Izmir. And okay, since I am Italian Levantine, you can imagine my speech will be in Italian way, so you can imagine how we proceed. Anyway, first of all, I want to say hello to our guests and thank you for participating in this event. Of course, actually, I would like to make this speech during maybe in some enjoyable days, but unfortunately, in this pandemic period, people socialize in virtual environments. Although it's against to our Levantine DNA, because you know we always prefer warm contacts and touch people and etc. So tonight, our Levantine Association, with the support of LHF London, thank you to Craig and Quentin and all colleagues there, arranged for the first time a webinar. For us, it's really a big event. With this opportunity, I want to thank Dr. Philip Mansel for accepting to be part of this event. And thanks also to all my colleagues of the association from Izmir and Istanbul, because they really worked hard for this organization. I want to say that another thanks to Mr. Peter Papi, Rodney Symes, and Mr. Noel Mikalev, because they established this wonderful Levantine association here in Izmir. And finally, a huge thanks with respect to Mr. Alex Baltazzi, who left us 4 years ago, but he was the owner of the idea to establish a Levantine association in Izmir first. Anyway, since we are not the only Levantine in Turkey, here in Izmir, before to conclude, I am pleased to announce that from now on, our Levantine Association will continue on its way together with Istanbul Levantine people, and hopeful in the next future with all Levantine around in Turkey. So thanks once again to all of you for participate on this interesting event, and have a nice view.
Thank you, Giuliano. And now, Mr. Quentin Compton Bishop, please, the chairman of the Levantine Heritage Foundation in London, for your welcoming remarks to our guests.
Okay, thank you very much, Salva. Welcome, everybody. This is a great day that we are having a joint event under the auspices of the newly formed Levantine Association. Welcome, everybody. I hope that we will be able to have more of these events and share our common interest and expertise. I don't want to delay any further. Just to repeat, there's a message that has come through on the chat line about when the Christmas concert is. Look at the bottom of the screen, the details are there, and I believe the same link will be used. Now I'm going to pass back to Salva to introduce Dr. Philip Mansel.
Thank you, Quentin. The Christmas concert will be next Saturday, 19th of December, and the details will be shared soon, the same Zoom link details. Coming back to our guest and to our topic tonight, the topic of Dr. Mansel's presentation this evening is Istanbul and Smyrna through the eyes of Levantine artists, from Luigi Mayer to Fausto Zonaro. Luigi Mayer, Amedeo Preziosi, and Fausto Zonaro were three artists living in Istanbul. They portrayed not only grand panoramas and diplomatic receptions, but also everyday life. Cafes, dances, Bairam receptions, and they were specifically polyglot and Levantine. Mayer and Preziosi were from Rome and Malta, respectively. They married ladies from Pera, Istanbul. Zonaro was from Padua. He went everywhere in Istanbul, and he became the court painter, official court painter of Abdulhamid, and he spoke Turkish. Using many little-known pictures, Dr. Mansel will show us these artists' importance as recorders of buildings, monuments, and street life in Istanbul and in Smyrna. And in the future, we will hopefully hold some exhibitions to introduce them to a greater public. He will also show us work by other Levantine artists, including Ovid Kurtovic, who painted scenes from Smyrna, from Izmir, as well as the Great Fire of 1922. Dr. Philip Mansel is a British historian of courts and cities of France and the Ottoman Empire. He was born in London in 1951 and educated at Eton College, where he was a King's Scholar, and at Balliol College, Oxford, where he studied modern history and modern languages. Following 4 years of research into French court, he was awarded his doctorate degree at the University of College, London, in 1978. Altogether, he has published 14 books on history and biography, mainly related to France or the Ottoman Empire and the Middle East. His most recent book is King of World, The Life of Louis XIV, published by Penguin in 2019. Dr. Philip Mansel lives in London, traveling to Paris and elsewhere for research, conferences, and lectures. He's also a trustee of the Levantine Heritage Foundation, a partner of our association, sharing the same mission. Dr. Mansel, the floor is all yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Philip, shall I stop my share and you will share your screen?
Yes, yes, please.
Okay, you have the opportunity to share.
Okay, 1 second.
Excellent, that's visible.
Okay, good evening. Thank you so much for the invitation. It's a very exciting moment. And I wish all good things to the Levantine Association, cooperating with the Levantine Heritage Foundation. We've had conferences in Istanbul, in London, and in Athens. We focused on shipping and trade, identities and heritage, but we've slightly missed out on the arts. So I thought it was appropriate to have a talk on Levantine artists as a key to all these things: heritage, identity, commerce in the Ottoman Empire and indeed elsewhere. And I just want to begin with a discovery. A few years ago, 2 years ago, in a Paris flat, this extraordinary picture of the French ambassador of Louis XIV in 1674 in front of the city of Jerusalem. Why is he there? He's touring the empire with a copy of the latest set of capitulations or treaty between the Ottoman Empire and France, which did so much to create the Levant and to encourage trade and the free observance of religions. And this picture is now in the Rue de Marignan, above the office of Oscar de la Renta. It cannot be moved, since for unknown reasons it is plastered to the wall. And now I move on to Jean-Baptiste van Moor. Some of you will have heard of him, a Dutchman who came with the French ambassador in 1699 to Istanbul and stayed there for 40 years. Little is known of his life, but he did want, and I quote, "to instruct myself fundamentally with all the particularities of the manners and customs of the Turks." And there's an extraordinary heritage of pictures which show that he did do just that. Here is the At Maidan with a procession of the Grand Vizier. All these pictures are now in the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam because they were collected by the Dutch ambassador. Here is a procession, a wedding procession in front of Rumeli Hisar. These are unique views, some of the earliest views of Istanbul and of Turkish life. You see, he's not just an outsider, he's an insider outsider who can observe Turkish ceremonies. And this is a famous book, the Nation du Levant. They used the term Levant, and indeed Van Moor was the king's painter in the Levant, en Levant. He had that title. And this is a book of Turkish costumes, which was published in Paris and was the basis for all views of Turkish costumes subsequently. And here you see a Levantine merchant, marchand franc. He is wearing Turkish dress, but a Western hat to show that he is a Catholic Christian under the protection of Ottoman law and French law. And here are other types of the Levant. You see an interpreter, a black eunuch, Turkish soldiers, and a Greek priest, bottom right. And again, this is in the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam. And he's very much part of Turkish life. He could even paint a rebel. This is Patrona Halil, who led the first, I think it's right to say, the first popular revolt in Turkish history, in front of the entrance to Topkapi Palace. And please remember this picture, because we'll be coming to a later equivalent towards the end of the talk. So Van Moor knew a Turkish rebel and was able to paint his portrait, 1730. And then there were many panoramas. The history isn't well known, but there are more panoramas like this in different collections in Europe and now in Istanbul. This was found in Ripley Castle in England and was probably commissioned by a grand tourist around 1780. And there were artists in Smyrna, Izmir. This is a picture by an unknown artist around 1730. It shows the Qadi of Istanbul receiving the Dutch consul and Dutch merchants in a sort of strip cartoon in front of the picture, and behind is the great trading city of Smyrna, already very prosperous, very international, with the flags of different consuls of different nations on the waterfront. And here is the visit of the French admiral to the governor of Smyrna in around 1768. Monsieur le Prince de l'Istenois. You see again, it is both a Turkish and a diplomatic procession, watched by the people of the city, a symbol of the relatively good relations lasting for hundreds of years between France and the Ottoman Empire. This can be seen in the Navy Museum in Paris. Here is another view of Smyrna, again an unknown artist with Cadife Calais in the background, and the ships of different nations bringing the goods of Europe to be sold to the merchants of Asia in return for the goods of Asia. And I just want to tell you, there is an exhibition coming on in London at the Soane Museum from March to May 2021, if all goes well. And these are the never before seen drawings by William Pars, who's an artist accompanying an archaeological expedition to discover the ruins, the antiquities of Ionia, 1764. They go to Smyrna and they see Didyma and many other places. This is, you see how rivers were crossed at the time. This is an English gentleman with a very large Turkish escort at the Temple of Apollo at Miletus. This is Didyma. And this is the Temple of Bacchus at Teos. And of course, they made books of these drawings, and they also collected items to adorn the collections of England. So many of the antiquities of Anatolia and Ionia and Smyrna can now be seen in the British Museum. And there is another new book out by Carter Findlay about this extraordinary enterprise by an Armenian Catholic dragoman, Muradja Dawson, a very international or Levantine figure who works for the Swedish embassy. He's Ottoman, and he also publishes this extraordinary book, Tableau Général de l'Empire Ottoman, in Paris, with many illustrations, a complete illustrated record of life in Istanbul in the 1780s and of the hierarchy of the Ottoman Empire. There you see Kayıthane as it was as a pleasure ground. And now I come to Luigi Mayer, a very Levantine figure, and Brian Llewellyn and I hope there will one day be an exhibition on him. Brian has been researching him for many years. He was probably a Roman artist, possibly from southern Switzerland, Ticino, who was educated in Rome, painted Sicily in the 1780s, and then joined the household of the British ambassador in Constantinople, Sir Robert Ainsley. And he did an unknown number of drawings of Constantinople. And then in 1792, he went round the Ottoman Empire with 3 British travelers. It was commonplace then to travel around the Ottoman Empire, particularly because the French Revolution had unsettled Western Europe. Thankfully, they kept a diary, so we know quite a lot about this. And he did the first drawings of the coast of Syria, the coast of Anatolia, the coast of Lycia, Knidos, Telmessos, and many other places. And I'll start showing you some of his extraordinary, very original and very human drawings of these places. This is his wife, Clara Barthold, because he married a lady of Pera. More research is being done on her background. Please note her magnificent Pera style headdress, but her Western dress, but an Ottoman headdress. This is a view, another panorama of Constantinople, showing the number of boats always in the harbor, Topkapi Palace, Hagia Sophia, and so on. A classic view, and this is a more unusual view taken from the Tower of Lear. He did these for the ambassador, for the travelers, Charles Graves and others, and probably for other clients too. He's a professional artist earning his living through his drawings. Here is the Bosphorus, showing scenes of archery, a favorite Ottoman sport. Here are Greek ladies dancing on the Asian shore at Çubukli. He was very keen on dancing, as you'll find out later. Here are Greeks dancing at Tarabya. I think it's the feast of St. John every June. Again, you see a certain harmony between communities. I think those are Western Europeans watching the Greeks and Ottomans. Here you see a scene in the garden of the English embassy in Pera. They are beating the carpets to clean them, as people did every summer. Here is a scene of the village of Belgrade, just outside Istanbul, where many embassies had summer embassies to escape plague in the city. And here he's begun to travel. This is Rhodes. And with Mayer, you have a view of many of the ports of the Levant. And often it's the first view. And he has a very distinctive bluish light. He was a pupil of Piranesi and brings some of Piranesi's originality to his views of the Levant. Here you see the caravan bridge outside Smyrna, where these huge caravans, often beginning in Isfahan or Aleppo, would bring the products to Smyrna. Here you see a bit of the ruins of Ephesus, frequently visited by travelers, and in fact remains from Ephesus from the 1620s are now in the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford. Another scene of Ephesus, you see that maybe Mayer himself sketching in the foreground, or one of the travelers, always escorted by Turks to see that no harm would come to them. And here you see a sword dance in Egypt. They reached Egypt, and it's obviously the person in front is semi-naked. So again, you see the originality of Luigi Mayer. And please watch this space, because hopefully there will be a Mayer exhibition one day in London and hopefully in Istanbul too. And now I want to move on to another Levantine artist, probably familiar to many of you, and that is Count Amedeo Preziosi. He came from Malta, which was then a British-owned island, and he came to Istanbul around 1842, and he stayed there for 40 years. Again, like Mayer, he marries a local lady, in his case, a Greek lady, and his studio on Hamalbashi Sokak in what's now Beyoğlu became one of the sights of the city, visited by all prominent visitors. He has a very productive studio. Again, he's an artist earning at least some of his living from his pictures. Many Western clients, including the Prince of Wales, Emilia Hornby, who wrote a wonderful account of Istanbul during the Crimean War, and the great Elchi himself, Lord Stratford de Redcliffe, who commissioned pictures in the 1850s. And again, he's part of Turkish life. His watercolors were included in the Ottoman pavilion in the Paris International Exhibition of 1867, and among many Ottoman exhibitions in Istanbul itself. Here he is. Hopefully one day there should be a complete catalogue raisonné of his works. And here I'm going to show you some of his pictures. You see a classic view, the Sultan going to mosque on a Friday, in this case, the Beylerbeyi Mosque on the Asian shore, being watched by spectators. You see Ottomans and Western Europeans clearly distinguished in one of the front boats. This is in the days, I think, of Sultan Abdulhamid. And here you see a view of foreign navies, Allied navies in the Bosphorus, 1855, done for Lord Stratford de Redcliffe. This is very significant. It's the time of the Crimean War. Britain, France, Piedmont, and the Ottoman Empire allied together to prevent Russian dominance in the Middle East. It was a war undertaken for the integrity and independence of the Ottoman Empire, and the Ottoman Empire was formally admitted into the Concert of Europe at the Congress of Paris in 1856. And many Western observers said the Ottoman Grand Vizier Ali Pasha at this Congress was far the most interesting and dominant figure. Here you see another classic view of the Golden Horn and the Bosphorus by Preziosi. And here you see kayaks waiting at Beykoz. This is the wrong way around. They're waiting for customers, ladies waiting to take kayaks at the time when kayaks were the main means of getting around the city. Shopping, he's very keen. Levantine artists weren't just doing grand diplomatic or political scenes. They were doing scenes of daily life. Here a lady is shopping in the covered bazaar. Here you see a cafe, not many other cafe scenes, different people in the cafe, only men at this time, and a Persian in the background. And here you see more scenes of shopping, ladies in the covered bazaar, Turkish Muslim ladies. Again and again, a great scene of the bazaar. And this is in the courtyard of the Bayezid Mosque. And a hamal, another means of moving things around the city, was by hamals, of course. And Preziosi had 4 children. Again, there needs to be another book and exhibition about him to learn more about what he wrote about the city. And one thing that links Preziosi and Luigi Mayer and other artists like Lyotard, who was in Istanbul 1738 to 1742, is that they went back through Wallachia and Moldavia. They also did scenes of life in Romania, and hopefully there will be more exhibitions there in Bucharest, because Bucharest also, in its way, was a Levantine city. And I would like to conclude with another artist, also from the West. Luigi Mayer was from Rome, Preziosi from Malta. Fausto Zonaro was from near Padua in the Veneto, and he saw himself as a Venetian artist, as the heir to Gentile Bellini, who came to Constantinople to paint Mehmed the Conqueror in 1480, and also as a Levantine artist. He called himself a Levantine artist. He came in 1891. He married one of his pupils, Eliza, in the 1890s in Istanbul. And like many other artists, he's at first a protege of the ambassadors. He's taken up by the Russian ambassador. He has exhibitions, has a studio in the city. His pictures are bought by embassies. And this picture of the Ertugrul cavalry, the Sultan's cavalry, crossing the Galata Bridge, one of the symbols of the 19th century city, because it was a modern bridge linking the two halves of the city. And many different people of in many different costumes were constantly crossing it. And here you see a symbol of Ottoman power at a time when the Ottoman Empire had been defeated by Russia, was crippled by debt. The economy was being taken over by the Caisse de la Dette and many other Western interests. But nevertheless, the Ottoman Empire still had armies, soldiers on the spot in the different cities of the Levant. This was a factor that often people forgot. And here, this crack regiment is being watched by admiring Western Europeans and Turks on the left. And this picture was shown to the Sultan, won his approval. This is Abdulhamid, Sultan from 1876 to 1909, a very controversial figure. He maintained Ottoman sovereignty, and he was a patron of the arts, and he made Zonaro his official court painter in 1896 in succession to Luigi Acquarone. And Zonaro fulfilled his function. He had to go 4 days a week to the great palace of Yildiz, which dominated the city. He was given a salary of 40 liras a month. He learned Turkish. From now on, I was an official in the court. I was a courtier. My place was in an office in which there were 7 chamberlains, and he painted members of the Sultan's family. Here you see a picture of the attack commemorating an Ottoman victory over Greece in 1897. This is now in a waiting room in Dolmabahce Palace. It was where the ambassadors waited or were meant to wait before seeing the Sultan. So again, a symbol of Ottoman power. And this is 1898, the visit of the German Emperor and Empress, Kaiser Wilhelm II and Augusta Victoria, to Abdulhamid. This is what Abdulhamid thought of as his coup. Britain, France, and Russia have designs on Ottoman territory. Therefore, he will ally himself to Germany, the strongest nation in Europe. And the Kaiser came to visit him, and with him came a whole flotilla of German industrialists, many German contracts. Siemens and many other companies are penetrating the Ottoman Empire. And one of the great plans of Sultan Abdulhamid is the Berlin to Baghdad railway, bringing development and trade to the Asian side of the empire. And Wilhelm II helped ensure this was a reality. And it helped transform Anatolian agriculture. And Wilhelm II also had a pro-Muslim policy. He declared that he would always be a friend to the Sultan and the 300 Muslims in the world. And here he is outside the Chalet Kursku in Yildiz on the hill above the Bosphorus. The Emperor and Empress leaving their residence. This residence was extended solely for the purpose of receiving the German Emperor and many other foreign visitors who came to see Abdulhamid in the Istanbul's last years of imperial glory. And this is a scene in the garden of the British Embassy, the daughter of Sir Philip Currie, the British ambassador, in a sedan chair on her way to be married. This is a son of Abdulhamid, Prince Burhanuddin Effendi, in Yildiz Palace. Please note the porcelain jar. This was because Yildiz had its own porcelain factory. And this is Zonaro himself, very much the Ottoman official, wearing a fez, wearing his Ottoman orders. And he did learn Turkish, and he was allowed to go round the city. Here you see, I apologize, it's not very clear. This is a photograph of him being watched by children as he's painting scenes of the city. And he painted possibly around 1300 in all. Very few cities have been as fully recorded as Istanbul was by Zonaro. And again, he's an insider, outsider. He has the Sultan's special permission to go anywhere he wants. He's protected by the government, and he has an outsider's curiosity. Here you see he's drawing another Bosphorus scene, ladies in a kayak, showing their faces, which is unusual. You see a scene on the quay near Dolmabahce Mosque in the background, and Jahangir in the background. And you see ladies taking a kayak. Many of his scenes show the water and the light of Istanbul. And then he's also shows religious scenes. He himself attended the Rifai Tekke every week, and there are rumors that he became a Rifai dervish himself. But this is a scene of the celebration of Muharram by the Shia Muslims of the city. By then, the Ottoman Empire was sufficiently tolerant to allow Shia festivities in the capital of Sunni Islam. I don't think they would be allowed now. Maybe I'm wrong. And this is a scene of a meeting of the Rifai dervishes. And Zonaro paints himself, is one of the figures on the left. This is a famous holy man walking on people, a miracle. And they're being watched by Westerners and by Turks. And this is one of the very few scenes of a Sufi order recorded by a Western artist. And I've seen a reproduction of this in a tekke in Istanbul myself. So it's accepted by Sufi orders now as a unique record of such events. And he also painted Bairam festivities, ordinary Bairam festivities, as you see here. And fishing, one of the great occupations of the city. Both Van Moor and Favre, another artist in the 18th century, did pictures of fishing because there were so many different fishing techniques and so many different fish in Istanbul, but these pictures are now lost. Military scene. And then 1907, he does a copy of Bellini's portrait of Fatih Sultan Mehmed for Abdulhamid. He's not yet allowed to paint Abdulhamid. He only met him occasionally. He described him, and I quote, as a red-bearded gentleman in a jacket and fez, holding a walking stick in his hand, who spoke in a deep voice to all the Sultan's questions. How are you? Are you comfortable in Istanbul? Is your family well? Are there beautiful paintings in my gallery? He replied, yes, Effendi. So Zonaro is proof, if we needed it, of the Ottoman dynasty's interest in painting and in portraits and in commemorating itself. There was a picture gallery in Yildiz Palace under Abdulhamid, and there are many, many pictures in Dolmabahce. And here is one of Abdulhamid's chief advisors, Izzet Holo Pasha, an Arab from Damascus, who is the brains behind another great railway scheme, the Hejaz Railway from Damascus to Mecca. It only reached Medina, and as I'm sure you know, was blown up by Lawrence of Arabia and his friends in the First World War. 1908, there is a revolution, the Young Turk Revolution, partly a military coup also. And after that, things relax. Abdulhamid lets many more people into his Selamlik. This is a photograph taken by Elisa Zonaro, Zonaro's wife, who photographs his works. She keeps his accounts. She keeps a complete record of his activities. And I forgot to say that Clara Mayer, the wife of Luigi Mayer, also was an artist and also helped her husband in all his activities and to publish his works in books of aquatints in the early 19th century in London, which again helped display the Ottoman Empire to the outside world and record many archaeological sites and cities for the first time. So this is a wonderful photograph of Abdulhamid, and Zonaro is finally allowed to paint the Sultan's portrait when he's a constitutional monarch for a few months between 1908 and 1909. And he said, the Sultan said nothing and he merely sighed very deeply. Well, he had a lot to sigh about because the Young Turks were about to overthrow him. And there's a battle of wills between the Sultan and supporters of absolutism and the Young Turks and supporters of constitutionalism. And Zonaro is in the thick of it. He paints the Sultan, but in 1909, there is a counter coup of soldiers, and briefly, the Sultan recovers absolute power. And he goes to mosque, and Zonaro writes in his wonderful memoirs, which have been published thanks to Errol Makzume in Turkish and in an English translation, in a wonderful illustrated edition, as Zonaro himself intended. And Zonaro says that when Abdulhamid first went to mosque during the constitutional era, he was cheered by crowds carrying banners proclaiming liberty, equality, fraternity, and justice. And he had never heard such cries of long live the Sultan, nor seen such a jubilant crowd. However, April 1909, there is a counter coup. People are frightened, and one of Zonaro's neighbors takes refuge in his house with him, and it is the father of Enver Pasha, this famous young Turk officer adored in the Ottoman Empire by people who supported the Young Turk Revolution. And he leads a Macedonian army, an army from Salonika, into Istanbul. They promise they're not going to overthrow Abdulhamid, but of course they do that. And behind him here are some Macedonian irregulars, because he's in league with the Chetes or bandits of Macedonia. And some of them, in my opinion, were Christian, because there were many Greek, Turkish, and Albanian Turkish alliances at that time. Here is, like Patrona Halil 200 years before, it is a revolutionary at the moment of taking power. He is painted by Zonaro because his father had been a neighbor of Zonaro and took refuge in Zonaro's house. And the binoculars you see in this picture were later given by Enver Pasha to Zonaro himself and are still with the family now. You see the date in the corner, 24th of April, 1909. So I want to juxtapose these two pictures. You see a Levantine artist is recording a successful Turkish revolution in two different centuries. And he also paints Pasha, the commander of the Salonika army, which had taken power in Istanbul. In 1909, Abdulhamid is deposed and sent to Salonika. Şevket Pasha briefly becomes Grand Vizier, but is assassinated in a mysterious assassination, which possibly was due to the fact that he didn't always agree with Enver Pasha. And Zonaro leaves in 1910, and again it is a very humdrum dispute. It's not about politics or Abdulhamid. It's because he'd been given this wonderful house in Akaretla Sokak by the Sultan as a favor. The Sultan believed in rewarding his servants well. And the Young Turk revolutionaries in 1910 dare to ask for rent, and indeed back rent. And Zonaro was so infuriated that he left with his family and his pictures for Italy, eventually settling in San Remo, where in 1922 he was 2023 he was later joined by the last Sultan Vahdettin. So he thought he'd left the Ottoman Empire, but he didn't really, because the Ottoman Empire caught up with him in San Remo. And of course he had his pictures, his memoirs, his photographs, his accounts. There is, thanks to him, there is a complete record of Istanbul life in the late 19th and early 20th century, as there is thanks to Van Moor in the early 18th century, and thanks to Van Moor to Luigi Mayer in the late 18th century. So let us hope there are more exhibitions of these wonderful Levantine artists, which will emphasize the incredible contribution they all made to understanding, commemorating, and preserving the past of the Ottoman Empire. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Philip, for this enlightening speech and for sharing with us all those paintings that most of them most probably have not been seen by any one of us. And thank you so much for being with us this evening. Thank you. It was
my pleasure.
a wonderful, wonderful
Amazing.
And now may I, before taking your questions, I have seen a few questions in the chat box about the Christmas concert. I think there was a problem with the slide. Just let me tell you very briefly that the concert will be next Saturday, 19th of December. It's an organ concert by Simon Arting. And the time is 8:45 p.m. Turkish time, 5:45 p.m. GMT. The Zoom details will be the same, but will be shared. So if there are any other questions about this concert, or first of all, if you have any questions for Dr. Mansel, please write in your chat box with your full name so I can direct your questions to our guest. Thank you very much. Just let me remind you that we have about 20-25 minutes of Q&A session. So we have some thank yous from Hilal Kazan, from Suhat Tarman, from Ayçe Güzel. They all thank you for this wonderful presentation.
It's from Mustafa Hidwai.
Hidwai, a wonderful talk. Besides Zonaro, did other artists paint Muharrem processions?
And not that I know of, but they may well have done. I think Muharrem processions were only allowed in the 19th century and early 20th century. And they weren't in the street, they were inside, I think, the Vizier Khan. But obviously it became a public site because you see Westerners as well as Turks watching it.
Okan Dikers is thanking us for the great visuals. Jean-Claude Najar is asking, you cited other lesser known painters. Could you give us their names and others?
Yes. Well, first of all, there's the artist of Monsieur de Nointel, the ambassador in front of Jerusalem, who also did other pictures, and nobody knows who it was. There have been names suggested, but they haven't fitted. So research is going on that. There is also Lyotard, one of the greatest portraitists of the 18th century in Europe. He comes with travelers in 1738 to Istanbul. He stays for 4 years. He does paint Ottoman officials. He paints many ladies of Pera sitting on cushions and so on. There have been exhibitions of him in London and Paris recently. He paints ladies drinking coffee and so on. But again, we don't really know much about his conditions of life and his studio in Istanbul. As for Van Moor, who is there for 40 years and paints at least 200 pictures, we don't, probably his studio is inside the courtyard of the French embassy, but nothing is really known about him, except that everybody went to his funeral at Saint-Benoît when he died in 1738. So there is Lyotard, there is also Favre, who comes in the 1750s and stays for about 20 years. And his wonderful portraits of Vergennes and Madame de Vergennes in Ottoman dress are in the Musée de Pera. And there you see, they're living embodiments of the French-Ottoman alliance, because Vergennes is dressed as an Ottoman official, and Madame de Vergennes is herself a lady from Pera, or from a French lady living in Pera, who is dressed in Pera dress. And then there are many others. There is Casas, who comes with Choiseul-Gouffier in the 1780s. He does wonderful pictures of Constantinople and again of all the Ottoman Empire, Athens, Cairo, Palmyra, many other sites. There has been an exhibition of him, a lot of his drawings in the Musée des Beaux-Arts in Tours, but there's not a complete catalogue raisonné or an account of his travels. And did he draw at these places, or did he make sketches and then work them up into paintings later? Again, we would like to know. The question about, there are some Luigi Mayer in the Musée de Pera, and I think there are some Preziosi also.
Edwin Charnot is thanking you for the excellent talk and is asking if any of these artists venture to Smyrna and record some scenes from that region.
Yes. Oh, sorry, I stopped too early. I forgot to show Vidi Kurtovic's drawings of ladies of Smyrna, and then he has a terrifying picture of the fire of Smyrna, which is in the Benaki Museum in Athens. So he gets to Smyrna, Luigi Mayer gets to Smyrna, and the other views I showed at the beginning of Smyrna, and David Wilkie is in Smyrna around 1839.
Thank you. And Mladen Rachev is asking if you would do similar presentation of photographs only.
Yes, I could do. Many other people have worked on photographs. They're better known than these pictures, I think. And there's such an embarras de richesse. I don't know how you could begin to make a choice.
And Chris Carnigan is asking, thanking you for the most interesting talk. Where are these paintings? Mostly in private collections, perhaps some of them spread throughout Turkey and Western Europe. Is there any museum or palace with a large collection?
Well, the Musée de Pera in Istanbul has a large collection. It often changes many pictures of ambassadors, including Vergennes, as I mentioned. The British Museum and the Victoria and Albert Museum have wonderful holdings of Luigi Mayer and of other artists, including, above all, Preziosi in the Victoria and Albert Museum. But these are drawings that are in boxes. They aren't normally on show to the public. But you can go and make an appointment and see them yourself. The museum at Tours has Casas pictures. The Louvre has many Lyotards, and they are basically all over Western Europe, and many discoveries waiting to be made, in my opinion, in French chateaux or private collections, because the French connection was so great and deep with the Ottoman Empire. Like this view of Jerusalem, and there are other views by that artist. It's a cycle commissioned by Monsieur de Nointel to commemorate his successful conclusion of a treaty, a renewal of capitulations with the Ottoman Empire. And we don't know where the others are. They were painted in Istanbul and brought back to France in the 1670s.
And sorry.
Yes.
I believe this answers your question as well, Nilay Özlü, because Nilay is asking, which collections or museums hold Preziosi's works besides Pera? Alison Miner is asking, she has seen prints made from these paintings. Were they usually made contemporaneously or later on?
Yes, they were usually made contemporaneously, like Preziosi's, for sale. There were not many prints made from Zonaro, but of Luigi Mayer, there were aquatints made in printed volumes in, say, 1803 to 1810, so that's about 10 or 15 years after the pictures were made. They were made for sale, and Brian Llewellyn has shown that these books had a big impact in England, and I think they were also translated into French, but the aquatints are not nearly as good as the original drawings. And he made several versions of each drawing for different customers at the time. But it is really essential that there is a Luigi Mayer exhibition, hopefully in London and Istanbul sometime in the next few years.
And Mustafa Kidwai is asking again, are there paintings of more closed events, like inside the hammam or the sema ceremonies of the whirling dervishes?
Van Moor did the whirling dervishes, but I'm not certain if any other artist did. In the hammam, there is an extraordinary picture in the Muraja Dawson book, reproduced in Carter Findlay's book, of the Sultan being bathed, and also of ladies bathing. And this is from accounts which he heard. He said it was very difficult to get information about the hammam, about the harem, but he did, because he spoke Turkish. He's an Armenian Catholic dragoman with many contacts all over the city, and they would then describe it to Lépinas and other artists in Paris, who then did their version.
And Nadezhda Alexandrova is asking, thanking you for the wonderful talk. We saw that the painters have also painted Greek and Western women living in Pera, or the European part, but did they also paint Circassian women or enslaved women at slave markets, for instance? She's asking from Bulgaria.
There is a picture of a slave market in the National Museum of Scotland in Edinburgh. I don't know whether it's painted from direct observation. I'm sure, yes, many people painted Circassian women. I can't think who at the moment, but in the 19th century, it becomes quite a common subject.
And Sinan Bayraktaroğlu is commenting that there is a portrait of a lady by Zonaro wearing a blue skirt, the skirt made up of 3 parts, üçetek, and holding a cigarette. Was this someone from the Ottoman palace or a lady from the Pera?
I'm sure it was probably from Pera, just smoking a cigarette with such freedom. He did do pictures of some of Abdulhamid's daughters, but not of palace ladies, as far as I know.
And well, thanking you. Thomas Harrison is asking, the harem was a big topic of the narrative in the 19th century. Was it also a topic of the visual arts?
The what was the topic?
The harem.
The
harem.
harem. Yes, but obviously mainly it was not from observation. It was from other people's reports and accounts. Though Luigi Mayer did meet princesses. And I don't think, there's another question I see about Luigi Mayer's wife. Clara Mayer did do paintings of scenes in Istanbul. She didn't travel with him in the Ottoman Empire, but she did do paintings of scenes, and Zonaro's wife did a lot of photographs. She photographs him. She's very good with the camera, but not, as far as I know, paintings, though she may well have done.
Are there any other books that you could recommend besides Erol Maksume's book on Zonaro?
Yes, Zeynep Inancourt on Constantinople and Orientalism, the articles of Brian Llewellyn, the book by Carter Findlay on Muraja Dawson's book with many pictures, also pictures from private Swedish collections of descendants of this Swedish dragoman, showing views of Istanbul and scenes in Istanbul.
Selma Somer is asking if there are any women painters?
Yes.
Potentially with access to the harem.
We know women visited the harem, but I don't, as far as I know, they didn't paint it. But of course, there are paintings of Circassian ladies hanging in Dolmabahce Palace now, bought by Sultan Abdulaziz. The conditions in which they were painted, I don't know about.
And Gino Campaner is asking how come Leonardo de Mango was not mentioned?
Because it was such a big subject, I couldn't mention everybody. And I think Luigi Mayer in particular is not very well known.
And Umut Turan is asking, you use mainly the Levantine painter term. Is there any difference between Levantine and Orientalist painters from historical categorical point of view?
Yes, there is a difference. I think Levantines really live in the city and know it well and know the languages, or at least some of the languages. And they're not just visiting for a few months or a few years. And I would call, Zonaro did at one time call himself a Levantine painter. He also called himself a Venetian painter because he's proud of the connection with Gentile Bellini, the similarity. And of course, he's an Ottoman painter. He's the Ottoman Sultan's view of his empire and Ottoman history. Lots of history paintings also. I didn't show them because I was concentrating on the life of the city. And he also has this great advantage, is that he writes memoirs which have been published by, thanks to Erol Maksume, which are a very interesting account from the painter's point of view of the city, in particular of these years of revolution, 1908 to 1909. As some of the questioners point out, that lots of these paintings are being sold all the time at Christie's and Sotheby's and elsewhere in Europe.
Mm-hmm. Can we describe Fausto Zonaro as a Levantine? Alev Barberolo is asking.
Well, I'm all for a very wide definition of Levantine. Anybody who calls himself or is international living in these cities, at the heart of the Italian community, the international community in Istanbul, knowing lots of people from different communities, knowing the ambassadors and knowing the palace and knowing Turkish and going to areas of Istanbul that many Turks didn't go to.
And Zeynep Cebeji is asking if the studios of these artists were open to the public, were not missed by the foreign tourists.
Yes, that's a very good question. Yes, they were. Well, we don't know about Van Moor or Luigi Mayer, but it is known that Preziosi's studio was open to the public. People went there because they were, in fact, galleries with pictures for sale. These people had to live, and the same with Zonaro's studio in the 1890s. He had lots of things for sale. Winston Churchill went there in 1907. And he had exhibitions in his grand house in Akaretla Sokak. He had exhibitions. These artists needed income, so they kept their galleries open.
Well, I believe this is the end of our questions Q&A session. Nuri Çolakoğlu is thanking for the great presentation, because I wish this would go on a little bit more.
Yes, I'm sorry.
And everyone's thanking you for the wonderful, enlightening speech and all those paintings that you've shared with us. So thank you very much for joining us. And once again, you have the slide on the Christmas concert, and hope to see you all next week. And thank you very much, Philip.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for all those who have joined us from all around the world. I have seen someone joining us from Rio de Janeiro and all around Europe, the United States. These are the contact addresses. You have our Facebook and email addresses on screen. So please do not hesitate to contact us and join us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
May I comment, please? Jonathan Beard here from Istanbul.
Yes, Jonathan, hello.
I'm sorry, I'm not technically literate, so I've got to do it this way rather than type in. Thank you very much indeed, Philip. Extraordinary, wonderful, absolutely expected, wonderful stuff. You didn't refer to Fossati, nor did you refer to Lewis. Is
Yes.
there a reason for that? I mean, you've talked about Italians and other continentals, but not so much the Lewises and others.
Yes, I just wanted to focus on some artists, not cram everybody in, but it is a wonderful subject. I'm just going through a catalogue of books on Istanbul before 1930. I mean, they're incredibly rich, as are the paintings of Istanbul. Each one is worthy of a new, thorough exhibition with new works. Lewis and Fossati for his work in Hagia Sophia and elsewhere. And there have been a lot of exhibitions recently in Istanbul, one on Raimondo Daronco, the architect, for example. There have been exhibitions on Zonaro that Errol organized in Florence recently and elsewhere. And I hope there are many more. I mean, there's never been a Zonaro exhibition in London, for example. There's been one in Florence and Rome, and I don't think there's been one in Istanbul. They're very, and all the apparatus around them, diaries, letters, photographs, account books, is so interesting, and Zonaro's relationship with Enver Bey, for example. Hopefully this will all happen in the future.
So I think we can end our event for this evening if there are not any other questions. Quentin, do you have any comments, any remarks?
Thank you, Selva, and thank you very much, Philip, for an excellent presentation, and thank you everybody for joining us. I think this was a very good start to a collaborative relationship between the associations, and I hope we'll have many more. And we look forward to seeing everybody at the Christmas concert next Saturday.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, and good evening, everyone.
Good evening.